Hello, hello picture book fans. This is Minnie Grey speaking to you as part of the Klaus Flugge Prize celebrations. That's the prize for really innovative, amazing new illustrators and their books. Anyway, so today we've got a Q&A where people have sent me some questions, and I'm going to do my best to answer your questions and make some sense if that's possible. And here is my room where I work, which is a total mess, as you can see, completely full. So anyway, I'm going to start on the questions here. So the first question is from Lorraine Ansell. And the question is, where does Minnie get the inspiration for her stories? So inspiration, well, today I'm wearing my my apron of security and safety because you need it when you're live streaming. But also I'm wearing an apron partly because making a picture book is a bit like making a cake. So if you want to make a cake, the first thing to do is to collect lots of delicious ingredients. And if you want to make a picture book, part of my process of making a picture book is collecting delicious ingredients too. And you need somewhere to collect them in, which is why all these behind us here, you can see all these sketchbooks, and that's where I collect my ideas. Scruffy ideas, crazy ideas, loopy ideas, they all get stuck in my sketchbooks for when I want to come back and see what I can make them into. And my books seem to quite often be about certain things. So they're quite often nursery rhymes and fairy tales that I've gone and used as a launch pad, a springboard to make my own stories out of. That's stories like, where do I put them? Help. Oh yeah. Sorry about that. That's stories like Egg Drop. I was thinking about the Humpty Dumpty and the Dish and Spoon. So some of my stories are about nursery rhyme characters, but they're also about food. So I love drawing food. So quite often food coming to life is one of my inspirations. And I've noticed another one is toys. So it's quite often things that aren't usually alive having adventures, animated. I'm animating them as things like Traction Man is about toy having adventures, and also toys in space, because toys are a bit vulnerable. Bad things can happen to toys. They can get lost. And when you're a child, you're kind of always making up a secret life for them. And then some of my books seem to quite often be about pets with jobs, like Space Dog, who zooms around the outer spooniverse, and Three by the Sea. Okay, so I hope that does the inspiration question. On to another question. Okay, so here the question is Traction Man based on a real person that you know? So that's from Mary. And then from Claire Zinkin, question, why do you think Traction Man has been so popular, especially in schools? What artists, illustrators influenced your approach? So Traction Man happened really because I was remembering before I was making picture books, at one stage I was a primary school teacher, and I was on playground duty, and this little boy zoomed up to me and he went, Miss Grey, look at my Action Man. And his Action Man was wearing a homemade knitted kind of suit, kind of two-piece suit but the buttons were really too big, so it looked just like a romper suit. And I sort of hoped that little boy would manage his Action Man. I really felt for him, and I hoped he could get through the day without being completely humiliated. And so when I was starting making picture books, I thought about that poor Action Man, and I remembered back to when I was a kid and my brother had Action Men, and their feet would always come off in their boots, and we would drop them out of the window on a hanky, a parachute, and things like that. And so there's sort of trying to stay noble and heroic while people throw you terrible outfits was where it came from. But later, when my son Herbie was a baby, we had a nanny called Lisa who really liked going to car boot sales. And one day she bought a whole load, a big sack of Action Man stuff at a car boot sale. And right at the bottom of it was an Action Man wearing a pair of knitted green trousers. Maybe there was a jacket with it at one point, but knitted green trousers. And then someone else sent me a picture of a knitted green. So maybe there was a knitted green outfit going on back in the the day. You know, maybe a Blue Peter or someone had a knitting pattern. Maybe it's a thing. Anyway, so Traction Man came from, the idea came from sort of those places, and I think that maybe the thing about Traction Man is it's one of those things that when you watch children play, they just pick up the toys and start talking for them, and in a way that's what Traction Man is. It's like just picking up everything around your house and it being part of the adventure. And I've over the sort of lockdown time, some classes at schools have been sending me videos they've done of them. They've made their own Traction Man videos using all the toys around their house, and it's really fun to see what, you know, what new characters suddenly appear. So yeah. Okay, on to another question. This one is from Ferelith Horden. So from Ferelith: Minnie, you are as well known for your lively texts and stories as for your lively illustrations. What comes first, an image, an egg, mouse, cows jumping over a moon, a character, or the idea for a story arising out of something else, a nursery rhyme perhaps? So what comes first? Well, I think usually you've got a starting point that you're starting to think about. I suppose maybe I could sort of say, well, what happened with The Last Wolf? So I was thinking about Red Riding Hood, and I thought, well, maybe instead of going into the woods, so I was sort of thinking, what can I do with the Red Riding Hood story? But it's partly because I really love going walking in Wytham Woods, and so I was thinking, well, what if there was a red, but rather than taking goodies to Granny's house, what if she was wanting to catch a wolf? So I've got my red over here. So she's off into the woods to catch a wolf. But then I thought, well, are there any wolves in the woods nowadays? And the answer is, in Britain, there haven't been any wolves in the woods for quite a few hundred years, so she wouldn't be able to catch one. But the important thing about story making picture books is you can make anything you want happen. So if you want wolves in your woods, you can have wolves in your woods. And so that's where my story came from. It's a sort of wish fulfillment, really. And when I'm making a story, quite often, sometimes I might just write a few scribbles at the back of my sketchbook. I can show you those for The Last Wolf. I'll just go and grab it. So here's it's a bit bright, but the very beginning of the story came from just thinking about this. In fact, it's on this post-it note here. A little girl with Red Riding Hood cloak who's looking for a wolf, wants to find one, wanted a wolf. So that was the beginning of the story, and then I've done some more kind of just scribbling notes around here about what might go in the story. And then usually something like that goes in the back of my sketchbooks. And then what I tend to do is, when I'm ready, I've got some time to kind of take it from the back. So in the back goes all sorts of rubbish and any old ideas and just scribbly things that might come in useful, and newspaper cuttings and anything at all. And then at this point, I'm trying to kind of put words and pictures together to start making myself a sort of dummy version of the book. So these are sort of lots of sketchy bits and bobs that ended up going in the dummy of the wolf, and then there's always other useful information in there as well. So that's what my process is. There's some more. Here's some more kind of trying to work out the spreads for the dummy version at that point. So I tend to find that I bounce back between words and pictures. You do some words and then respond to it with pictures, and then you do some pictures and respond to that with words. So it's a kind of like a sort of call and answer responding kind of thing going on. And I don't think that answered the question very well, but anyway, it was my best shot. Back to another question. Here we have a question from Picture Book Blogger, and the question is there an existing story that you'd like to do the illustrations for? And well, I've always wanted to do science fiction books like 1,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or The Time Machine, or, you know, almost Gulliver's Travels is another sort of science fiction book in a way. But then you're tied to a massive narrative to have to draw the pictures to. And recently I've been doing some poetry, and I was thinking, actually, poetry is great for freewheeling. And one thing I've always really wanted to do was Edward Lear, because it's the best nonsense ever. So something like the Jumblies, I think, would be a beautiful poem to draw pictures for. And also things like Hilaire. I've done one Hilaire Belloc with Jim, but I've always wondered whether it would be good to do some more Hilaire Bellocs. So yeah, poetry's good. Right, so on to the next question. This is from Books for Keeps. And the question is, your first job was in theatre, designing sets. How did you get from there to picture books, and how much does that experience still influence you? Well spotted, Books for Keeps, because I do have an obsession with theatres. Quite often I do stories, and my books are sort of a bit like a theatre. So at the Bad Bunny's Magic Show, oh, it's over here. This is a book that's really a theatre performance. So we have the whole thing really taking place on stage, behind the curtains, and there the bunnies are performing their tricks. And so it's that sort of thing that where every time you read the book, it's like a performance. This book is so the thing about theatres is you sort of end up having layers of scenery going on, and sometimes it's fun to think about your pictures being like layers in a sort of layered up scenery. But also, when I did theatre shows, which wasn't very long, and I never made much money, and I wasn't very good at getting work. But anyway, when I was doing shows, it was always really sad because you do this amazing thing, and then in the end it had to be dismantled and taken down and never seen again. And maybe in a way, picture books are a kind of wish fulfillment where you get to your book lives forever. You gain a bit of immortality, maybe by every time you can open the book, it can do its performance again and again and again, ad infinitum. And I do like other books that are theatre books as well. So here's a theatre book, a book being a theatre, because books can be all sorts of things. Books are cunning masters of disguise. Here's a theatre book by Ian Beck called Little Miss Muppet that all takes place on a stage. And then I think this book here, There Are Cats in This Book by Vivienne Schwartz, is like a performance book, because it makes you have to get involved as well, and the cats make you do things. So there's that thing that a picture book is a performance, and with adult, child and book together, it's always a different performance. Over here I have my insect theatre. So going over here, oh, there we go. That's my insects theatre. The insects are performing The Greatest Show on Earth. Rod the Roach is going to be hosting it tonight. So the obsession with theatres and books goes on and on. Okay, brilliant. So now, on to the next question. As an illustrator with a very individual style, which artist or illustrator has been most influential or inspiring for your work? And this is from Feralith again. And I think the ones that got me going was when I was working as a year 2 school teacher, and in my book corner there were all these new picture books that I'd never grown up with, and they were the things that made me think that picture books could be for anyone of any age. And the one that particularly I loved was the works of John Siesko and Lane Smith. There's The True Story of the Three Little Pigs, there's Math's Curse. This is a little less well known, Cowboy and Octopus, but very weird and funny. And I just loved the way they were just anarchic, and sort of took apart in Stinky Cheese Man, they take apart the sort of fabric of the book and put it back together again, and they seem to be for anyone of any age. So picture books, not just for small people. But the other things that I think inspired me was when I was a child, I must have been 90% of my time watching television. And so I grew up with the work of Oliver Postgate and Peter Firmin, and so Bagpuss and the Clangers, Noggin the Nog, are all things that I think really influenced me. And also the animated Mr. Ben. I love that way that he'd hide the horse's legs behind a mountain so you didn't have to animate them, things like that. So yeah, those are probably part of my inspiration. And the other thing that I was obsessed with when I was a child, maybe sort of from 10 onwards, was the work of Arthur Rackham and Edmund Dulac, who did watercolours from probably 1890s through to the 1930s, 40s, and then also a bit of Heath Robinson, and then as a child, my first loves were Dr. Seuss and the Moomins. Okay. On to another question. Your picture book, The Last Wolf, has a strong environmental theme. Is this something you plan to continue with in future projects? What role can children's books have in raising awareness of environmental issues? And this is from Sue McGonigal. So when you think about the impact picture books can have on environmental issues, think, well, there's this book here, The Lost Words, by Jackie Morris and Robert Macfarlane, and this book, I think, just has and is still having a tremendous impact. It's, you probably all know what it's about, and it's those words that have disappeared from the Oxford Dictionary and children's lives, and the important thing is that if you can name things, you can recognize them in your environment, and then you can spot them, and you'll always notice them. So it's that naming things, and it was brilliant in The Lost Words that every naming is a spell. So so that's the thing that picture books can bring into the fabric of everything. And it's the lockdown situation does seem to be bringing people closer to nature. So people are sort of noticing little things, going out in the same patch and noticing the sort of changes over March and April, and noticing the flowers in the pavements, and maybe learning the names of a few more plants, a few more birds, noticing bird song. So that's kind of interesting. It's interesting that people seem to share so much common love of the natural world around them. And it would be great if our government could reflect that a bit more, because I don't think they're maybe in tune always with what people would really sacrifice for, in a way. So one of my most inspirational places is in lockdown at the moment, but it's the Oxford Natural History Museum, where I really like to go sketching. Particularly like the tall birds that are there. There's a Cape vulture, and here's a Pacific loon. So I'm quite inspired by the things that you find in the Natural History Museum, the treasure of the whole great tree of life, and all those different creatures. And so that has been inspiring the things I've been working on sort of lately in the last year or so. Yeah. So a book may not change the planet, but when you read a book, your mind is never the same afterwards. So a book will change your mind. But also at the same time, it's a really long time since the Lorax, by Dr. Seuss, came out, and it sort of feels like we haven't quite got the message of the Lorax yet in terms of actual, the human impact on the planet. But maybe it's not that everybody hasn't got that message. Maybe it's not about changing people's minds, but changing the regulations. It's that the regulations haven't got the message. Anyway, that wasn't really about picture books. That was just me ranting. So let's go on to another question. Your picture books, this is from Ferilith, Your picture books are very much rooted in the nursery world, but we are not dealing with real life situations. Rather, we meet characters from nursery lore or media. How did this come about? Where did the egg come from? Not to mention Traction Man and Dish and Spoon. And I might have been answering this already with when I was talking about where Little Red came from, but quite often a book as well comes from asking the questions, what if? So with the story of the Dish and Spoon, it started with the dish and spoon, obviously from the nursery rhyme, Hey Diddle Diddle, but also it came from thinking about them and how they go together, and what things they could do together. So my starting point was what can a dish and spoon do together, and collecting the things that they might do together leads you to them crossing the ocean, driving fast cars, getting broken, and the action of the story. So there's the what if spinning out questions about your characters. I don't know if I answered that very well, but anyway, let's carry on. This is from Sue McGonigal. Your picture books are often very playful. What do you hope young readers gain from this playfulness, and how do you develop ideas for new books? And when you watch small people playing, what's often happening is they're picking something up and then they're talking for it. So they're kind of animating it and doing the talking. And making it come to life. So play is a sort of act of animation. And so quite often the things you animate as a child are just things you find around you, the food that's in front of you, or the toys that you've got, or your pencil, or your glass, or a plant. When my mum, when I was very little, my mum wrote down in a book she had that I kept talking about two characters called Gary and Linda, and she didn't know who they were. But actually, Gary and Linda was my hands. And when we went on long car journeys, Gary and Linda would walk around, and I don't know I think they might have been married, and they would do things together. And so that's where you kind of just, your hands become the things that you animate. So when the very beginning of a book called Space Dog, what happened was Herbie and my son Herbie was about 2, and we had this toy from the Early Learning Centre, the Early Learning Centre rocket, which has in the nose cone, there's where you drive it. At the bottom is where your kind of your space exploration vehicle goes. But in the middle, there's this fantastic kind of place for, with a bed and microwave and coffee making facilities, and under the bed there's a toilet as well, and there's toilet paper and books to read, everything you need to go into space. And so it was playing with this and zooming it round the house that kind of gave me the idea of Space Dog, where his space is really the universe is your house. And maybe that's a bit like what it's like for children when they're playing. Yeah. But the great thing about the sort of playful world is that in a playful world, you often have disasters happen too. And that's great because you can model what it's like to have a terrible disaster without it being real. Now I think I'm on to my last question here now. And this question is from Charlotte Hacking. And Charlotte says, hello Minnie, you're illustrating A.F. Harold's new poetry collection. What are the differences in illustrating poetry from a picture book? And what do you look for in the poems to bring out your ideas for the accompanying illustrations? So what's the difference between illustrating a storybook, picture book, and a poetry book? And this is a really great question because I hadn't thought about it until Charlotte posed the question. And there are really, really great things about illustrating poetry. One thing is it's not all your fault. Like someone else, namely probably A.F. Harold, has written those poems. So you didn't that's not, you're not responsible for it all. You share the responsibility. And then the next thing is that there isn't a plot. So you don't have to kind of draw the same characters doing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. You don't even have to be so tied to the words. You can sort of free wheel off. And that's what all the fun of. We've been doing a book called the Book of Not Entirely Useful Advice. And there were quite a few pages, but the pages are all sort of different. I've got my my printouts here. There's quite a lot of swearing parrots in it, but you can go from, so I've got my shrunk AF Harold. So in the book, AF Harold's been kind of shrunk down into, so he can go in and be inside his own book. So I got to mess with AF Harold as well. There we go. But also from one page to the next, you can go from cornflakes, bears in your cornflakes, to where are you? Cat soup and duck soup, to dogs in your sausages, to tigers at your picnic. And you can sort of unleash all these different things who can kind of wander around. It's a bit like letting things free in a book, unleashing unlocking the cages at the zoo and letting these creatures start wandering about and kind of wandering in and out the pages. And that this is the magical thing about words and pictures, which is that you can take random words and you can take disconnected pictures, but when you put them together, something completely new happens out of it, kind of Frankenstein style, but there's some brand new thing is made when those words and those pictures come together, and the thing that makes that happen is your imagination, the imagination of the reader. So that is me. I'm just going to very quickly show you. Up here are some new things I've been doing lately. On this top shelf here, these are Pippi Longstocking books for Oxford University Press. Pippi's 75 years old this year, although she doesn't look it, obviously. And then over here is a new book with Roger McGough, which is called Money Go Round, all about wind in the willowsy style animals. Okay. So thank you for listening in to this ramble. And from coming to you from Mini Grey and the Klaus Flugge Prize. Yeah, it's been great talking to you, and thank you to all the people that asked questions. What great questions they were. Okay, and